Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and to a new episode of the Mclaren Senna GTR modeling series. In the last episode, we modeled the car's hood and the large air intake in the center. Today, we'll be working on the sides of the car. If you missed the previous episode, then go watch it by pressing the button on the top right corner of the screen. This said, make sure to leave a like to this video and follow the channel if you haven't done it yet. And without further ado, let's get started. Here's what we covered in the previous episode. Now let's focus on modeling the car's door. First, we need to adjust this part of the hood because it doesn't match the reference. To do so, I use vertex slide by pressing G twice, then pressing Alt to align these vertices with the reference image. Also, I use the Relax Loop tool, on which I assign Shift+R as a shortcut to adjust the shape of the curve. Now that our hood is fixed, select this border. Then duplicate it and separate it to a new object. And now we'll concentrate on this portion of the border. Select it and extrude it on the X-axis to match our blueprint from top view. Then extrude these edges again to fill the rest of the shape. As always, remember to maintain good topology while doing this, and use loop tools to make the process much easier. Also, remember to remove unnecessary bevels like these ones, and to apply them on all borders to make them sharp. Now that we handled this, we can pass on modeling the carbon fiber square underneath what we've made so far. I firstly had to adjust this border to make it look a little bit better. Then I simply extruded the border down, added some edge loops, used loop tools to smooth out the shape. And finally separated these two parts by pressing V and dragging the border down slightly. Repeat the same operation with this vertex here. Now we'll need to sharpen all of these edges, which can't be sharpened without applying the Solidify modifier, so let's do that. First of all, decrease the thickness to 0.001 meters, then hover with your mouse on the modifier and press Ctrl+A to apply it. Now you'll be able to select these edges and apply bevels to them. We'll also need to adjust our model on front view. Just select these vertices and make them follow the curvature of the rest of the car. Now that our first piece is done, let's concentrate on the rest, which is going to be underneath what we just did. Firstly, separate this edge to a new object. Then duplicate this portion of the model, separate it and join it with the other object we just created. Finally, merge these two vertices. Once you do that, go into side view and start outlining this part of the model. Then pick the last vertex of the line and adjust its position to somewhere around here, where it's going to be attached to the carbon fiber you can see from the reference. Anyway, note that this is not its final position, and during the process of making this video, I had to adjust it multiple times, so place it here for now, but we're going to change it later. Now we need to adjust the shape of this curve. The blueprint won't be super helpful for this, so we'll mostly rely on image references to guide us. Also, don't worry too much about getting the curve shape perfect right now, as we'll have plenty of chances to refine it once it's a bit more developed. We can finally focus on shaping the car's fender. Start by extruding the curve backwards, then align all the vertices to this edge on our blueprint. While doing this, I also tried to adjust the curve we did earlier, giving it a smoother look. Once you're finished with that, adjust these vertices too. Then add 2 edge loops at the middle of the model. Adjust this curve here, and use Alt+S to inflate these faces a little bit. Next, we're going to add some thickness to the object so we can start shaping the lower part of the rearview mirror. First, select your object, then head over to the Modifiers tab and add a Solidify modifier. Make sure to place it between the mirror and bevel modifiers in the modifier stack so the order is correct. Now adjust the thickness of the Solidify modifier to 0.004 meters, then hit Ctrl+A to apply the modifier. Now that we've applied the modifier, we can see that the geometry is looking a bit off in this area, but don't worry, we just need to make a few adjustments to fix this. What I did was simply adjust the position of these edges and add bevels to them. Now that our geometry is fixed, we can pass on modeling the lower part of the rear view mirrors. Start by deleting this face, then extrude these edges on the y-axis. Once you did that, repeat the same process on this side and apply bevels as you see on video. Now extrude this again and start following the shape of the mirror. Once you have this type of shape, you can enable proportional editing by pressing O on your keyboard, or by pressing this circle on top of the screen. Then move this face of the mirror and adjust the influence by using your scroll wheel so that it takes the correct shape. After doing that, you can always adjust it further to make it look better. The next thing we have to do is connect these two sides together. So simply select these vertices and press M, then at last to merge them. Now repeat the same process to all of these, but don't forget to delete these faces first. And now we need to adjust the internal part of our model so that we can move it freely. To do that, select all of these vertices and press V to separate them from the rest of the mesh. But now we need to adjust some things to make our topology look more tidy. First of all, delete this edge loop by pressing Dissolve Edges, then pick these other edges and use double G to make them overlap with these ones. Now select all, press M, then by distance to merge duplicates. Finally, delete this edge and replace it with a new face on both sides. Now it's time to handle the inner part of this object. I started to give form to it from the front, where I tried to give it a curved shape. Then from here, I moved these vertices to create a cool, rounded shape. Also, on the bottom of the surface, I separated these vertices in order to move them freely. Then I started to use loop tools to smooth out the rest of the shape and maintain good topology. And in the end, you should obtain something like this. Next, we need to create something like a descending curve here to start shaping the rest of the car's door. Now we can move on to shaping another part of the car body, along with the car's door. Start by duplicating these edges and separating them into a new object. Then after making some space, extrude these edges and start creating a curve that goes down, following our existing geometry and our blueprint. And after doing that, we can start worrying about the shape of this part of the model. Basically, it just needs to be smoothed out a little bit. After doing that, we can model this black part that attaches to the inner part of our car's door. Firstly, extrude this out. Then scale this part down and smooth out these curves by using the Relax Loop tool. Now cut this out using V, bring this edge loop back using double G, and finally fill these empty holes by using Ctrl plus F, then grid fill. Also add some edge loops here. Then use loop tools to refine this shape and make it look better. Using your 3D cursor, scale down these three faces, making sure that you're using it as a pivot point. Then use loop tools again to smooth out the shape. I've decided to delete these faces at the back here because they aren't really adding much to the model. Plus, getting rid of these unnecessary faces will help us reduce the poly count, which can improve performance, especially when working with more complex models. And finally, it's time to model the car's door. We're going to start from this part here that we modeled in the previous episode. Duplicate these vertices and separate them to a new object. Then join them with what we just did earlier. Delete these faces as we don't need them anymore. Once you've done that, merge these two vertices. Then switch to top view and start extruding them as shown on screen, so we can easily connect everything afterwards. The next thing we have to do is to raise up these vertices to match the height of the blueprint. We'll also need to slightly modify the hood of the car. And once your vertices reach the correct height, you can go back to top view to position them correctly on the Y-axis following our blueprint. And finally, we can start working on the car's door. Correct the position of this part of the model, then start extruding these edges to create the upper part of the door. Once you've finished here on side view, go to top view. As you see here, this portion of the blueprint is not aligned correctly, but don't worry, we're going to fix this later. For now, follow the blueprint and align these edges as you see on screen. And after that, smooth out this part to make it look better. Now back here, we'll start to create some fake edges in order to give the illusion of tridimensionality. Obviously, repeat this with all the upper and lower part of the model. And don't forget to apply bevels to these corners to make them sharp. Now, to continue modeling, we'll have to adjust this blueprint, so let's do this. Position your 3D cursor somewhere around here next to the blueprint. Then scale this on the X-axis to fit our model, and it should be fixed. Also, you can repeat the same operation with these parts to make it look more proportionate. Now let's keep modeling from here. Start extruding some vertices from this point, and make sure you add the same number of vertices as on the other side. After doing that, extrude this, delete the back faces, and repeat the same process we followed earlier. Then fill this and remove unnecessary bevels. And also extrude these edges back to create the borders of the outer part of our door. Here we'll have to create a slight bent. Then we can go back to modeling this part here. And obviously make sure to make some back faces here too. Finally, we can pass on modeling the inner part of our car's door. First of all, we'll have to connect these edges. Then we can create a face using these 4 vertices, which is going to be the door's handle. Then simply fill this up and add some loop cuts. Also separate this to a new object. After doing that, also add some back faces and use loop tools to smooth out the top left corner of the model. Now we need to do the lower part of the door. Start by extruding this down, then straight up these edges on the Z axis, and align them with the blueprint after using Ctrl+I, then H to isolate them. Here you can notice another problem with the blueprint, but for now I think I'll leave it like this. As for the rest, I just continued adjusting these vertices correctly, and then I extruded them down to create a little corner. After adjusting this part here, we'll focus on this little curve that goes inside the car to create a sort of miniskirt. First of all, extrude these edges down and adjust their curvature using your 3D cursor and S+Y. Then add a loop cut, bring it back, add another one, and bring it down. Also, I'm going to add a bevel here using Ctrl+B to make this curve a little bit sharper. Now that our curve is done, we can align it with our blueprint in side view. And also add some back faces here and all around this part of the model. Looking at the references, you can see that the front of the miniskirt needs to be a bit wider to make space for the support above it. To do this, I simply selected some faces and moved them outward. I also adjusted a few back faces to match the size of the part above the miniskirt. And finally, we'll start creating the support for this part of the body. But first of all, we'll have to adjust its shape better to make it fit its support appropriately. To do that, I simply moved around some vertices on the front of the model outward, and then I used loop tools to refine the rest of the shape. And now we can pass on modeling the support. First of all, inset these faces and move the vertices to fit the size of the fender's base. Then select these ones and extrude them up to make them touch the body of the car. Also add a loop cut in between and slide back these vertices to make everything look smoother. Then remove these bevels. Add 2 edge loops here. And finally move these vertices to follow the curve of the fender. The next thing we're going to do is to divide the inner part of the car's door into 3 separate parts. One is going to be the majority of the door's black panel you can see on your reference. The other 2 are going to be behind this fender. Firstly, move your vertices as you see on screen to create the borders of our sections. Next, separate these sections into new objects, since we'll need to work with them separately. One will be this part of the miniskirt, and the other will be the section we just outlined. And now, to work with them, select both of these objects and press Ctrl+J to merge them. Then simply delete these faces and use M to merge these borders. And after that, obviously don't forget to create back faces and to clean your topology using loop tools. Now that everything's good, use V to cut these edges and bring these ones down a little bit to create some gap. Also, don't forget to fill some back faces on their corners too. And don't forget to sharpen all corners on the other side of the model. After completing these changes, we can merge these objects together by selecting them and pressing Ctrl+J again, so that we can join back some parts we separated before. After merging these objects back together, select all the vertices along this line and press M, then choose by distance to merge any duplicate vertices. Also, don't forget to delete some of the back faces here. Finally, to divide the door parts correctly, select these vertices and press V to separate them. Then use L to select the newly separated part and create a new object for it. For our newly created part, we'll need to add some new back faces. And also adjust the round corners to make them sharper. One of the last things we need to do for this episode is create the cylindrical supports that are placed on this part of the car, as you see from references. So let's go ahead and make them. One of the supports is going to be placed here in between these vertices. So place your 3D cursor here and add a cylinder. Obviously scale it down using this pop-up menu to fit the size of this hole, then rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees and set its number of vertices to 6. After that, press Ctrl+1 to add one level of subdivision. Delete these faces as they won't be visible. Then move this edge loop to the other side to create the support and adjust it to fit the model. Once you're satisfied with the first support, duplicate it with Shift+D and repeat the process with the second one. Then scale up these parts to make them look better and adjust them to fit the model. Now I want to remake this part here, as these two parts are supposed to be touching. Start by adding a loop cut on top of this part, then slide edges around to follow the curvature of the body and extrude this face up. Then apply some bevels and adjust it to fit the shape of the model. And finally, the last thing we're going to do for this part of the series is the door handle. First of all, I use my loop tools to improve my topology a little bit. Then I selected these faces, then insetted them and extruded them back to create the handle's hole. After doing that, I simply applied bevels on all corners to sharpen them and used loop tools to improve my topology even more. And finally, look at how beautiful our car is starting to look. Now that the doors of our car are complete, in the next episode, we'll finally focus on the roof and back of the car. This said, I wanted to thank y'all for watching this video until the end. Maybe subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss the next part of the series, and leave a like under this video if you want to. Also, leave a comment to let me know if you're liking this series so far, and we'll see in the next video.